I still remember the exact moment I realized I was losing him. Dante's hand was wrapped around mine, our fingers intertwined like they'd been 1,000 times before, but his eyes, those golden eyes that used to find me in every crowded room, were locked on Julian's face as the Omega laughed at something I hadn't heard. The citrus cedar scent of Dante's mark on my neck felt like it was fading, being overwritten by something I couldn't fight. Biology. The thing he swore didn't matter. Ren? Dante squeezed my hand, finally looking at me. You okay? I smiled. I was getting good at that. Yeah. Just thinking. What I was thinking was that love shouldn't feel like coming in second place. But I didn't say that. I never did. If you are getting interested in the story, please subscribe and comment where you are watching from, and don't forget to like as you go because the story will reveal a lot about love. It started 6 months ago when Dante met Julian at a pack gathering. I watched it happen, that moment when an alpha sensed their fated mate for the first time. Dante's entire body went rigid. His pupils dilated, and every instinct in him screamed to go to Julian. He didn't, though. He turned to me instead, his face stricken with panic and something that looked like guilt. Ren, he started. I know, I said quietly, because I did know. Every Omega knows what it looks like when an alpha finds their fated match. The biological imperative is written into our DNA, broadcasted through pheromones we can't control. Julian's sea salt and vanilla scent had flooded the room, and Dante's cedar had surged in response, and I'd stood there smelling like rain and petrichor. Pleasant, compatible, but not fated. Dante had loved me for 2 years before that night. We'd built something real, something that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with choice. He'd chosen me every day. We talked about bonding, about forever, about the life we'd build together. Then Julian happened. We can make this work, Dante said that night, holding my face in his hands. Love isn't a competition, Ren. What I feel for you doesn't disappear just because biology says I'm supposed to want someone else. I choose you. I'll always choose you. I wanted to believe him. God. I wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored every instinct screaming at me to run. Because here's the thing about being an Omega. We're taught from birth that fated bonds are sacred, unbreakable, worth more than any choice we could make ourselves. And I was about to stand in the way of one. What about Julian? I asked. Dante's jaw tightened. Julian will understand. I'll explain it to him. We can all be friends, but you're my partner. Ren. That doesn't change. Except it did change. Slowly at first, so gradually I almost didn't notice. If you're feeling that tension right now, that knot in your stomach wondering how bad this gets, hit that like button. Trust me, you'll want to stay for what happens next. And drop a comment telling me if you've ever felt like someone's second choice. Because this story is about to break your heart in ways you won't see coming. Julian didn't just understand, he integrated. Within weeks, he was part of our lives in ways I couldn't have predicted. Dante insisted it was innocent, that they were just getting to know each other, that denying the bond completely would be unhealthy for both of them. And maybe he was right. Maybe I was being paranoid when I noticed how Dante's hand would drift to Julian's shoulder when they talked. How his scent would sweeten around the other Omega in ways it never had with me. I'm not trying to replace you, Julian said to me one afternoon when Dante was at work. We were both at Dante's apartment. When had it stopped being our apartment in my mind? And Julian had brought over coffee as a peace offering. I know this is weird and complicated, and I'm sorry for that. I studied him. Julian was beautiful in that effortless way some Omegas are. Delicate features, dark hair that always looked artfully tousled, eyes like storm clouds. He was also genuinely kind, which made hating him impossible and resenting him inevitable. Do you love him? I asked. Julian's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. I don't know. The bond makes everything confusing. It's like, I'm drawn to him in ways I can't explain, but I don't know if that's love or just biology screaming at me. He looked up at me, and there was something raw in his expression. Do you hate me? No, I said honestly. I hate this situation. I hate that Dante's trying to have both of us and pretending it's not tearing him apart. I hate that I can smell his scent on you and know it means something different than when it's on me. I set down my own cup, my hands shaking slightly. But I don't hate you. For what it's worth, Julian said softly. I think what you and Dante have is real in ways the bond might never be. He talks about you constantly. The way you think, the way you challenge him, the way you make him laugh. I'm just genetics. Just genetics. The words should have comforted me. They didn't. Dante proposed a solution 2 months into our new reality. A triad bond. 3-way partnerships weren't common, but they existed. He could bond with both of us, and we could all build a life together. I can't lose either of you, he said, his voice breaking. We were in bed, just the two of us for once, and his forehead was pressed against mine. I love you, Rin. I love you so fucking much. But the bond with Julian, it's biological. I finished for him. It's not a competition, he insisted. Again. But it was. It absolutely was, and I was losing. The scent markings started subtly. Alphas scent mark their mates instinctively, rubbing their wrists against their partner's neck to broadcast ownership and affection. Dante had always been generous with his marks on me, making sure I smelled like him, like us. But after Julian, I noticed the marks becoming less frequent, less intense. And when I'd see Julian, he'd be drenched in Dante's cedar scent, marked so thoroughly that other alphas would never approach him. I didn't say anything. What could I say? Stop marking your fated mate? It would sound possessive and petty, and I was trying so hard not to be those things. Subscribe if you want to see where this heartbreak leads, because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about fated mates and chosen love. The real pain hasn't even started yet. Then came the heat cycles. Julian's first heat after meeting Dante happened 4 months into our arrangement. I was there when the symptoms started, the flushed skin, the spike in body temperature, the way his scent went from pleasant vanilla to something cloying and desperate that called to every alpha instinct. I need to help him through it, Dante said, already moving toward Julian's room. My stomach dropped. Dante, we talked about this. You said. I know what I said. But Ren, he's in distress. I can't just leave him to suffer through it alone. It's biological, I said flatly. Dante's face twisted with guilt and frustration. Why are you making this harder than it needs to be? It's just a heat cycle. It doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something. It meant 3 days of Dante locked in a room with Julian, their scents mixing in ways that made my Omega instincts scream with jealousy and loss. It meant listening to sounds through the walls that I tried to block out. It meant realizing that the physical intimacy Dante and I shared was now something he was giving to someone else, and calling it obligation. When Dante emerged on the 4th day, exhausted and reeking of sex and Julian's satisfied Omega scent, he tried to kiss me. I turned my face away. Don't, I said quietly. Ren, just don't. Not right now. Please. He respected that, at least. But the distance between us had grown into a chasm I didn't know how to cross. My own heat came 2 weeks later. I'd been on suppressants for years. Most Omegas were unless they were actively trying to conceive. But the stress of the situation had thrown my cycle off. I felt it coming on a Tuesday afternoon. The telltale ache in my lower abdomen. The way my skin became hypersensitive. The subtle shift in my scent from petrichor to something sweeter and more desperate. I called Dante immediately. I need you, I said, and hated how small my voice sounded. I'm on my way, he promised. 20 minutes. Okay? Just hold on. I held on. 20 minutes became 40. Then an hour. My heat was intensifying, the biological need becoming almost painful, and Dante still wasn't there. I called again. Ran, I'm so sorry, he said, and I could hear Julian's voice in the background. Julian's having an anxiety episode. It's bad, Ren. I can't leave him like this. Can you take another suppressant? Just to hold you over until. I hung up. I didn't want to hear the rest. I didn't want to know which excuse he'd give this time for choosing Julian over me. I rode out my heat alone in my apartment, the one I'd kept just in case. Even though Dante had asked me to give up the lease months ago, it was 3 days of biological hell. My body screaming for an alpha that didn't come. My Omega instincts telling me I'd been rejected, abandoned, found wanting. Dante showed up on day 4 with flowers and apologies. I accepted both numbly. "I'm sorry," he said. And he looked like he meant it. Julian was in crisis. And I couldn't just. "I know," I said, because I did know. Julian's needs would always come first. The biological bond would always win. "Let me make it up to you," Dante said, reaching for me. I let him, because I was still hoping, still believing that maybe if I just tried harder, if I was just better, if I loved him enough, it would be enough. It wouldn't be. Comment below if you've ever stayed in something you knew was ending, because you couldn't admit it to yourself yet. And keep watching, because the moment Ren finally breaks is coming, and it's devastating. The final straw came in October, 5 months into our triad that wasn't really a triad because I was always on the outside looking in. My mother called on a Wednesday evening. I was at Dante's place. I still spent most nights there, even though Julian had essentially moved in, making dinner while Dante and Julian watched something in the living room. "Ren." My mother's voice was tight with pain. "I'm at the hospital. They think it might be my heart. Can you come?" My hands went numb. My mother had a history of heart problems, and every hospital visit carried the weight of potential catastrophe. "I'm on my way." "Which hospital?" I walked into the living room in a daze. Dante and Julian were curled together on the couch, Dante's arm around Julian's shoulders, both of them laughing at whatever was on screen. They looked like a matched set. Two people who fit together perfectly, whose scents complemented each other, who moved in sync without thinking about it. "My mom's in the hospital," I said. "Heart problems. I need to go." Dante was up immediately, his alpha instincts kicking in. "I'll drive you. Let me grab my keys." Relief flooded through me. I needed him. I needed his steady presence, his strength, his support. "Thank you," I whispered. Julian stood too, his face pale. "Is she okay? Do they know what's wrong?" "Not yet. They're running tests." I was already moving toward the door, my heart pounding. Then Julian swayed slightly, his hand going to his forehead. "Oh, I feel." His sense spiked with distress, and Dante was at his side instantly. "Julian? What's wrong?" "I don't know. Dizzy. I think." Julian's breathing was becoming rapid, shallow. "I think I'm having another episode. The anxiety. I can't breathe." I watched Dante's face as he calculated, as he weighed his options. I already knew what he would choose. I'd known for months. "Ran," Dante said, not looking at me, all his attention on Julian. "Can you drive yourself? Or I can call you a cab." "I need to. Julian needs." "It's fine," I heard myself say. My voice sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else. "I'll drive myself. Take care of Julian." "I'm sorry," Dante said. And he did look at me then, his golden eyes full of genuine regret. "I promise I'll come as soon as Julian's stable. I'll be there, Ren. I promise." He wouldn't be, though. I knew that with sudden, crystalline clarity. He would stay with Julian because Julian needed him, because the bond demanded it, because biology would always win over choice. I drove to the hospital alone. I sat in the waiting room alone while they ran tests on my mother. I held her hand through the fear and the uncertainty alone. Dante texted updates about Julian's condition. Julian texted apologies. Neither of them came. My mother was okay. A panic attack that had mimicked cardiac symptoms, stress-induced and terrifying but not life-threatening. I drove her home at 2 in the morning, got her settled, and then sat in my car in her driveway and felt something inside me finally, irrevocably break. I'd been the second choice. I'd always been the second choice. No matter what Dante said, no matter how much he claimed to love me, when it came down to actual decisions, to showing up, to being present, to choosing between us, he chose Julian every time. And he would keep choosing Julian because that's what the biology demanded. I couldn't compete with fated bonds and biological imperatives and the way the universe itself seemed to be pushing them together. I deserved to be someone's first choice. I deserved to be with someone who didn't have to fight their own instincts to prioritize me. I deserved more than being loved in theory but neglected in practice. The decision crystallized in that moment, sitting in my mother's driveway at 3 in the morning. still smelling like the sterile hospital and my own dried tears. I was going to leave. Not in a dramatic confrontation. Not with accusations and pain and trying to make Dante understand something he was fundamentally incapable of understanding. I was just going to go. I went back to my apartment, the one I'd wisely never given up, and started packing. I called my boss and requested a transfer to the Seattle office. I blocked Dante's number, blocked Julian's number, and told my mother and my few close friends that I was not available to pass messages. I didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye, didn't give them the closure of explanation or argument. I just left. If you're feeling that ache in your chest right now, that mix of heartbreak and relief, smash that like button. And I promise you, this story is about to take a turn no one will see coming. The next 5 years change everything. The Seattle pack welcomed me without questions. I threw myself into work as a pack mediator, helping settle disputes, negotiating territorial boundaries, counseling troubled bonds. I was good at it, probably because I understood intimately what it felt like when love wasn't enough, when biology and choice collided, when people hurt each other despite their best intentions. I didn't date for the first year. The second year I tried a few times, but everything felt hollow. By year 3 I'd accepted that maybe I was just someone who loved once and completely, and that was okay. I had friends, I had purpose. I had a life I'd built entirely on my own terms. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was mine. Then, 2 years ago, I met Julian again. He was sitting in a coffee shop in Seattle's Omega district, looking thinner than I remembered, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. I froze when I saw him, every instinct screaming at me to run, to not engage, to protect the peace I'd finally found. But Julian looked up, and his storm-cloud eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that stopped me cold. Recognition, relief, and a grief that mirrored my own. "Run," he breathed. "Oh God, Ren." I should have walked away. Instead, I sat down across from him. "What are you doing here?" "I live here," Julian said. "Have for almost 3 years now." His hands were wrapped around a coffee cup, knuckles white. "I left Dante 6 months after you did." The world tilted. "What?" "I couldn't do it anymore," Julian said, and his voice cracked. "I couldn't be the reason someone else was miserable. I couldn't watch him pine for you every single day while trying to convince himself the bond was enough. And I couldn't—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I couldn't keep pretending I was in love with him when I was in love with you." I stopped breathing. "What did you just say?" Julian laughed, but it was broken and bitter. "I fell in love with you, Rin. Probably within weeks of meeting you. The way you challenged Dante, the way you stood your ground, the way you were kind to me even though I was destroying your relationship. You were everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. Strong and smart and real. And I was stuck in a biological bond with someone who loved you more than he'd ever loved me. Subscribe right now because what happens next will break and remake everything you think you know about this story. The twist isn't over. Not even close. My mind was reeling. "You loved me." "I love you," Julian corrected. Present tense. "I've spent 3 years trying to get over you and failing spectacularly." He looked down at his coffee. "I didn't come to Seattle to find you. I didn't even know you were here. But finding you feels like maybe the universe isn't completely cruel." We talked for 4 hours that day. Then we met again the next day and the day after that. Julian told me about leaving Dante, about the guilt and the relief, about breaking a fated bond that had felt like a beautiful cage, about choosing to walk away from biological imperative in favor of actual happiness. "He didn't fight it," Julian said. "When I told him I was leaving, he just nodded and said he understood. Then he asked if I knew where you were. Even then, even when I was ending things, he was thinking about you." I told Julian about the last 5 years, about building a new life, about learning to be enough for myself, about the way I'd finally stopped listening for Dante's voice in every crowd. We talked about guilt and choice and the ways biology lies to us about what we need. And slowly, carefully, we fell in love. Real love. Not the shadow of it we'd both been living in. Love that was choice all the way down, that had nothing to do with pheromones or bonds or biological imperatives. We chose each other every day, deliberately and completely. We bonded 18 months ago. My mark on Julian's neck, his mark on mine. Both of us finally, someone's first choice. Which brings me to today. To the meeting I'd been dreading for the past week since I got the assignment. The territorial dispute was routine, two neighboring packs arguing over boundaries and resource rights in the mountains outside Seattle. Standard mediation work that should have taken a week, maybe two. I'd reviewed the case files, prepared my approach, and walked into the conference room ready to do my job. Then I saw him. Dante stood at the head of the table, his golden eyes widening in shock as he recognized me. He looked older, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. His dark hair shot through with silver at the temples. He was still beautiful in that devastating way alphas often are, but there was a weariness to him that was new. "Ran," he said, and my name in his voice after 5 years felt like a punch to the chest. "Alpha Dante," I said professionally, keeping my voice steady. "I'm the mediator assigned to your case." I watched him process that, watched the realization dawn that we were going to have to work together, that he couldn't just leave or dismiss me. We were both trapped here by obligation and professionalism. "Can we talk?" Dante asked. "Privately, before we start the mediation?" Every instinct I had screamed at me to refuse. But I was a professional, and this was going to be difficult enough without unresolved personal issues hanging over it. 5 minutes, I agreed. We stepped into a side office. Dante closed the door, and suddenly the room felt too small. His cedar scent too familiar. The weight of our history too heavy. "You look good," Dante said. "Happy. I am happy. I looked for you," he said quietly. "For years. I hired investigators, I called in favors. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "You disappeared completely. That was intentional." "I know." Dante's voice was rough. "I know, and I don't blame you. God. Run, I don't blame you for any of it. I was an idiot. I tried to have everything, and I lost what actually mattered. Despite myself, despite the years and the healing and Julian waiting for me at home, I felt a twinge of old pain. You chose Julian. Every time you chose him. I didn't though," Dante said, and there was something desperate in his voice. "That's the thing, Rin. I didn't choose Julian. I stopped choosing you. I let the bond make my decisions for me. I told myself I was being fair to both of you, but really I was being a coward." He took a step closer. "Julian left me 6 months after you did. Did you know that?" "I know," I said. Dante's eyes narrowed. "How?" Then understanding dawned. "You've talked to him. You've seen him." "Yes." Is he okay? Is he happy?" The concern in Dante's voice was genuine, and that somehow made this worse. "He'd loved us both, in his broken way, and he'd lost us both." "He's very happy," I said. "We both are. Comment if you saw this coming, because I guarantee you didn't. And keep watching, the final twist will destroy you." Dante went very still. "You and Julian. We're bonded?" I said, and felt Julian's mark on my neck pulse warmly, like he could sense my distress even from miles away. "Have been for 18 months. I searched for the right words. We found each other in the aftermath of you. We found out we were each other's actual choice all along." I watched Dante's face cycle through emotions. Shock, disbelief, pain, and then something that looked almost like relief. "You're together. You chose each other." "We did. And you're happy? Both of you?" "Actually happy. Deliriously," I said, and it was true. Julian and I had built something real, something that didn't require us to compete or compromise or accept being second best. We'd found in each other exactly what we'd been missing. Someone who chose us first, always, without hesitation. Dante nodded slowly, then sat down heavily in one of the office chairs. "I think part of me always knew," he said quietly. "The way you two looked at each other. The way Julian talked about you. I didn't want to see it because it would have meant admitting I was the problem. That I was standing in the way of something real." "You weren't the problem," I said, surprising myself. "The situation was the problem. Fated bonds, biology, trying to force something that was never going to work. I sat down across from him. You weren't a villain, Dante. You were just an alpha trying to honor a biological imperative while also honoring a real relationship. It was impossible from the start. But you're together now, Dante said. You and Julian. How do you make it work without the biology pushing you together? That's exactly why it works, I said. We chose each other despite the biology. We don't have any imperatives forcing us together. No bonds making decisions for us. Every day we wake up and choose each other again. It's all choice all the way down. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm happy for you. Both of you. I mean it, Ren. If you found with each other what I couldn't give either of you, then maybe everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. Maybe, I said, but I didn't entirely believe it. The pain had been real, the damage had been real, and while Julian and I had found happiness in the rubble, I couldn't quite bring myself to call it destiny. Can I see him? Dante asked. Julian, is he here in Seattle? He is, but I don't think. I stopped. This wasn't my decision to make. I'll ask him. But Dante, you need to understand that he's moved on. We both have. Seeing you might not. I know, Dante said. I need to see that he's okay. That I didn't break him. That's all. We went back into the conference room and conducted the mediation. It was professional, efficient, and painful in ways that had nothing to do with territorial disputes. I watched Dante lead his pack delegation, saw the respect his pack members had for him, noticed the way he'd grown into his authority over the past 5 years. He was a good alpha, a good leader. He'd just been a terrible partner. The mediation took 3 days. On the second day, Julian showed up at the conference room during a break. He'd texted me asking where I was, and I'd warned him Dante was there, and he'd said he needed to see for himself that I was okay. I watched Dante's face when Julian walked in, saw the way his breath caught, the way his scent spiked with longing and regret, saw the exact moment he noticed Julian's bonding mark, my mark on his neck. Hello, Dante, Julian said quietly. Julian. Dante's voice was rough. You look good. I'm happy, Julian said and moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. We're happy. And that's when I saw it, the final, devastating realization crossing Dante's face. He was looking at us the way I'd once looked at him and Julian, like we were a matched set, two people who fit together perfectly, who moved in sync without thinking. We were what he and Julian had appeared to be, except ours was real. Dante had lost both of us, and we'd found each other. I'm glad, Dante said, and I believed he meant it. I'm sorry I couldn't give either of you what you deserved, but I'm glad you found it with each other. Julian squeezed my hand. Dante, I need you to know, it wasn't your fault. The bond, the way it pulls at you, I understand it now more than I did then. You were trying to do the impossible. I should have chosen better, Dante said. I should have chosen what was real over what was biological. Maybe, Julian said, or maybe you needed to lose us both to understand the difference. We finished the mediation on the third day. The packs reached an agreement that satisfied everyone, and I filed my report with professional detachment. Dante thanked me formally, shook my hand, and held on just a moment too long. Be happy, Ren, he said quietly. That's all I ever wanted for you. I am, I said. Finally. I watched him leave, this alpha who'd once been everything to me, and felt nothing. No longing, no regret, no wish that things had been different. Just a quiet acknowledgement that this chapter was finally truly closed. Julian was waiting for me in the parking garage. He pulled me into his arms, and I breathed in his sea salt and vanilla scent, felt his mark on my neck pulse in response to his nearness. How do you feel? He asked. Like I can finally stop looking back, I said. But here's what I didn't tell Julian, what I didn't tell Dante, what I haven't told anyone until now. 3 weeks after that meeting, I got a letter. Not from Dante, from his mother, the former alpha of his pack. Like and subscribe because you need to hear this next part, and it changes everything you think you understand about this story. The letter was handwritten. marked private and urgent. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Dear Ren, I'm writing to you without my son's knowledge or permission. What I'm about to tell you may change nothing, or it may change everything. I leave that judgment to you. Dante had a twin brother, Nathaniel. He died when they were 19. A car accident, sudden and senseless. Nate was Dante's everything. They were bonded in the way twins sometimes are, finishing each other's sentences, feeling each other's pain. When Nate died, something in Dante broke that never healed. Here's what Dante doesn't know. Nate was your fated mate. I sent it the first time you came to a pack gathering with my son. You have the exact pheromone signature that would have been compatible with Nathaniel's, not Dante's. My son was never supposed to bond with you. He was trying to fill his brother's absence with his brother's mate. When Dante met Julian, it wasn't fate. It was finally meeting his actual biological match. But by then, he'd fallen in love with you based on who you were, not biology. He was fighting his true bond to honor what he thought was a real choice, not realizing he'd been trying to live his dead brother's life all along. I don't tell you this to excuse his behavior or to suggest you should return to him. You've clearly found happiness, and you deserve that. I tell you this because you deserve to understand that what happened wasn't about you not being enough. It was about my son trying to be someone he wasn't, for someone he lost. I hope you find peace in this knowledge, whatever you decide to do with it. Elena Martinez. I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking, my mind reeling. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in the lockbox where I kept important documents. I didn't tell Julian. I didn't tell Dante, because the truth was it didn't matter. Whether I'd been meant for Dante or for his dead twin, whether the biology had been wrong from the start or just tragically complicated, none of it changed the outcome. I'd still been second choice. Julian had still been the biological imperative. We'd all still hurt each other in ways that couldn't be undone. But knowing the truth did give me something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness. Not for Dante. I'd already forgiven him in my own way. But for the universe, for biology, for the cruel trick of fate that had tangled 3 lives in impossible knots. We'd all been trying to fight or honor biological imperatives that were based on incomplete information. Dante had been trying to live a dead man's life. Julian had been bound to someone who was trying to be someone else. And I had been caught in the middle, loving someone who was biologically incompatible with me from the start. But Julian and we'd found each other outside of all of that. No fated bonds, no biological imperatives, no dead brothers' ghosts. Just 2 people who'd been broken by the same situation and had chosen to heal together. That was our real twist. Not the bond, not the fate, not the biology. The twist was that sometimes the happy ending has nothing to do with what we're supposed to do, and everything to do with who we choose to be. Julian came home that evening to find me sitting on our balcony, watching the Seattle sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "You're quiet," he said, sliding his arms around me from behind. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "Just thinking about how lucky I am," I said. "How lucky we are. Because Dante's out of our lives? Because you're in mine." Julian kissed my temple, and I felt his contentment through our bond. Our chosen bond, built on love and trust and daily decisions to keep choosing each other. I never told him about the letter. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, especially when the truth would only complicate a happiness that was finally, beautifully simple. But I did think about Nathaniel sometimes, this person I'd never met who I'd apparently been meant for according to biology. I wondered who he'd been, what he'd been like, whether we would have actually been compatible beyond pheromones and chemical signals. I wondered if he was out there somewhere in whatever comes after death. If he knew that his brother had tried to love his mate, and if he understood why it had failed. Mostly, though, I thought about how grateful I was that biology hadn't been the final word. That choice, real, messy, complicated choice, had won in the end. Drop a comment telling me what you think about that letter, about Elena's revelation, about whether Ren should tell Julian and Dante the truth. Because this is where I need your opinion. And hit subscribe because this isn't quite where the story ends. 6 months after the mediation, Julian and I were at the Omega District Spring Festival when I saw him again. Dante, standing alone near the food vendors, looking lost in a way that made my chest ache despite everything. "Do you want to leave?" Julian asked quietly, having spotted him too. "No," I said. "Actually, I want to introduce you two properly. No history, no pain. Just 3 people who used to hurt each other and don't anymore." We walked over together. Dante saw us coming and tensed, clearly preparing to leave, to give us space, to be the ghost he'd been for the past 5 years. "Dante," I said, "join us? We're about to get food." He looked between us, confused and wary. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said, and I was, because I'd realized something in the months since that mediation. Holding on to pain and anger and old wounds only gave them power. Letting them go, choosing peace, choosing to see Dante as just a person who tried and failed and suffered for it. That was the final freedom. We sat at a picnic table overlooking the Sound, the 3 of us who'd once been tangled in impossible knots. It was awkward at first, stilted conversation and careful politeness, but slowly, something shifted. Dante told us about his pack, about the work he'd been doing to reform their mating traditions, to give alphas and omegas more choice in who they bonded with. "I've been pushing for legislation," he said, "to make fated bonds optional rather than obligatory, so no one else has to go through what we went through." "That's good work," Julian said, and meant it. "It's penance," Dante said quietly. "I can't undo what I did to you both, but maybe I can stop it from happening to others." We talked about our lives, the careful, surface-level sharing of people who were testing whether friendship was possible after everything. Dante was alone, he admitted. He hadn't tried to date, hadn't pursued another bond. "I think I needed to figure out who I was without trying to be someone's alpha," he said. "Turns out I was using relationships to avoid dealing with—" He stopped himself. "With Nate," I said quietly. Dante's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "How do you—" "Your mother wrote to me," I said. 6 months ago. She told me about Nathaniel, about the accident, about what she suspected regarding pheromone compatibility." Julian's hand found mine under the table, supportive but confused. I hadn't told him. I squeezed back, asking for patience. "She told you?" Dante's voice was barely above a whisper. "About Nate being about you being. Meant for him, not you," I finished. "Yes." Dante put his face in his hands. "God, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said gently. "That's why I never told you. What would have been the point? It wouldn't have changed anything that happened. It wouldn't have made you love me more or Julian less. It would have just added guilt to pain you were already carrying." "But it explains everything," Dante said, looking up at me with haunted eyes. "Why I was so drawn to you but always felt like something was slightly off. Why being with you felt like trying to remember something I'd forgotten. I was trying to be Nate. I was trying to fill his absence with his mate. Even though I didn't know that's what I was doing." Julian was very still beside me. "Ran," he said carefully. "What is he talking about?" So I told him. I told him about the letter, about Nathaniel, about the biological compatibility that had been wrong from the start. I watched his face process the information, watched the pieces click into place. "So you were never meant for Dante at all," Julian said slowly. "And Dante's fated bond with me was real, but he was trying to force a bond with you that was actually meant for a dead man," I finished. "Yes. And you didn't tell me because?" "Because it doesn't matter," I said firmly. "Julian, it doesn't matter. We're not together because of some biological destiny or because we were meant to be. We're together because we chose each other. Because we built something real that has nothing to do with pheromones or fated bonds or dead twins. That's the whole point." Julian stared at me for a long moment, then started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes when something is so absurd you can't hold it in. "We really were all wrong for each other from the start, weren't we? Like cosmically, biologically, fundamentally wrong. Spectacularly wrong." Dante agreed, and there was something lighter in his voice, like a weight had been lifted. And yet, Julian said, turning to me with soft eyes, we figured it out anyway. We found each other anyway. We did, I said. Dante watched us, and there was grief in his expression but also something else. Acceptance, maybe, or peace. I'm glad, he said. I'm genuinely glad you found each other. And he took a breath. I'm sorry. For all of it. For not choosing better. For letting biology make my decisions. For hurting you both when you deserved so much more. We forgive you, Julian said, and looked at me for confirmation. I nodded. We do. And Dante, you need to forgive yourself. You were grieving your twin and trying to honor competing biological imperatives, and you did the best you could with information you didn't have. That's all any of us can do. Nathaniel would have liked you, Dante said suddenly, looking at me. My brother. He was kinder than me, more thoughtful. He would have probably handled the whole situation better. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he would have struggled too. We don't get to know alternate timelines. We only get this one, where we all made mistakes and hurt each other and somehow ended up here, having lunch and finding forgiveness. Is this closure? Dante asked. Are we okay now? I think we might be, Julian said. He looked at me. What do you think? I thought about the past 5 years, about the healing and the happiness and the life Julian and I had built together. I thought about Dante alone, doing penance through policy reform, trying to spare others the pain he'd caused us. I thought about Nathaniel, the ghost in this story, whose death had set everything in motion. I think we're better than okay, I said. I think we're free. We finished our meal in comfortable quiet. When it was time to leave, Dante stood and offered his hand. First to Julian, then to me. Not as lovers, not as former partners, but as people who'd survived something terrible together and come out the other side. Thank you, Dante said, for this, for not hating me. We never hated you, I said. We just couldn't stay. I understand the difference now, Dante said. Julian and I watched him walk away, back toward whatever life he was building for himself. My Omega turned to me, his sea salt and vanilla scent wrapping around me like comfort. Are you really okay? He asked. Learning all that about being meant for someone else? I'm more than okay, I said honestly. Because here's what I've learned. Being meant for someone doesn't guarantee happiness. Biology can push people together, but it can't make them compatible in the ways that actually matter. You and I, we work because we communicate, because we respect each other, because we wake up every day and choose this. That's worth more than any fated bond. You're absolutely sure? Julian pressed. Because if you need to explore, if you need to know what it would have been like with someone you were biologically compatible with. I kissed him, cutting off the words. When I pulled back, I made sure he was looking into my eyes. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are my choice, Julian. Not because biology says so, not because fate decided it, but because you're you. And that's everything. If you're crying right now, you're not alone. Comment and tell me if this is the ending you needed. And hit that subscribe button because I'm not done yet. There's one more piece to this story, and it's the one that changes everything. That night, I called Elena Martinez. Dante's mother answered on the third ring. Ran, she said, sounding unsurprised. I wondered if I'd hear from you. Why did you tell me? I asked. About Nathaniel. What did you hope would happen? Elena was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I didn't know. I've watched my son torture himself for 5 years over losing you. I've watched him try to become someone worthy of love while believing he's fundamentally broken. And I thought, maybe if he knew the truth, maybe if he understood why the biology felt wrong, he could finally forgive himself. You wanted me to tell him. I wanted someone to tell him, Elena said. I couldn't do it. It's not my story to tell, and I've caused him enough pain by keeping it secret this long. But you've moved on. You're happy. I thought maybe you'd be able to give him the truth without it destroying either of you. I told him today, I said, at the spring festival. Julian was there too. How did he take it? Better than I expected, I said. I think I think it helped him understand that what happened wasn't about failure. It was about impossible circumstances. And you? Elena asked gently. How are you with all of this? I'm good, I said, and realized I meant it completely. I'm with exactly who I'm supposed to be with, and it has nothing to do with biology or fate or any of that. It's just us. Our choice. That's all any of us can hope for, Elena said. Real love chosen freely. I'm glad you found it, Ren. And I'm sorry my family's tragedy complicated your path to it. It didn't complicate it, I said, understanding something for the first time. It led me to it. If Dante and I had been biologically compatible, if everything had been easy, I might never have met Julian. We might never have found each other. Sometimes the happy ending requires taking the hard path first. After I hung up, I found Julian on our balcony again, staring out at the Seattle lights. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, the way he'd done for me so many times. I have something to tell you, I said. Another secret? The opposite of a secret, I said. A promise. Julian, I need you to know. There is nothing about my past, about Dante, about Nathaniel, about any of it that makes me want to be anywhere but here with you. You are not my consolation prize or my second choice or my making the best of it. You are my first choice, my only choice, my everything choice. And I choose you every day not because I have to, but because I want to. Because there is no one else in this world I would rather build a life with. Julian turned in my arms, and there were tears on his face. You know what the twist is? He said. The real twist nobody saw coming? What? We were the love story all along, Julian said. Not you and Dante, not me and Dante. We were always supposed to find each other. We just had to break first to be ready for it. He was right. This had never been a story about fated mates or biological imperatives or the tragedy of coming in second. It had been a story about two people who'd been hurt by the same circumstances finding each other in the wreckage and building something better than what they'd lost. I love you, I said. I love you too, Julian said. First choice, always. 3 months later, Julian and I were at a pack bonding ceremony. One of Dante's pack members, celebrating their chosen bond rather than their fated one. Dante had invited us, and we decided to go, testing the boundaries of this new friendship we were building. Dante found us during the reception. He looked different, lighter, somehow, like he'd finally set down a burden he'd been carrying too long. There's someone I want you to meet, he said, and gestured to a man standing nearby. The man was tall, lean, with kind eyes and an easy smile. His scent was pine and rain. Grounding, comfortable, nothing like the overwhelming pull of a fated bond. This is Marcus, Dante said, and there was something shy in his voice I'd never heard before. We've been seeing each other for a few months. Nothing serious yet, but... He looked at Marcus with soft eyes. But it's real. It's a choice. Hi, Marcus said, offering his hand. I've heard a lot about you both. It's good to finally meet the people who taught Dante what real love looks like. Julian and I exchanged glances. We didn't teach him that, I said. You did, Dante said firmly. You showed me what it means to choose someone despite what biology says. You showed me that the hardest path is sometimes the right one. And you showed me that love without choice isn't really love at all. It's just chemistry. So you're choosing Marcus, Julian said. No fated bond? No fated bond, Dante confirmed. Just compatibility and conversation and waking up every day deciding to try. It's terrifying and wonderful and nothing like what I had before. It sounds perfect, I said, and meant it. We stayed at the ceremony for hours, celebrating love that was chosen rather than fated. Watching Dante smile more than I'd seen him smile in all the years I'd known him. Marcus was good for him, stable and grounding and entirely unconcerned with biological imperatives. As Julian and I drove home that night, I thought about how far we'd all come. From that terrible triad that had hurt everyone involved, to 3 separate people finding their own paths to happiness. Dante with his chosen alpha, Julian and me with our chosen bond. All of us finally understanding that love was never about biology or fate or what we were supposed to do. It was always about choice. Hard, Daily, deliberate choice. Are you going to write about this? Julian asked. I'd started keeping a journal, working through the past 5 years of pain and healing. Maybe, I said. Do you think anyone would believe it? That 3 people got everything wrong but somehow ended up happy anyway? Julian laughed. No, it's too messy to be real. But it is real, I said. That's the thing about life. It's always messier than stories. There's no neat ending, no moment where everything resolves perfectly. Just people stumbling forward, making mistakes, hurting each other, forgiving each other, and hopefully, if they're lucky, finding happiness in unexpected places. Is this our happy ending? Julian asked. This is our happy middle, I said. The ending's still being written, and that's the truth of it. 5 years after leaving Dante, 3 years after finding Julian, 6 months after forgiving the past. This is where we are. Not at an ending, but in the middle of a life we're building together, one choice at a time. Dante has Marcus. Julian has me. I have Julian. And somewhere out there, Nathaniel's ghost has finally been laid to rest, no longer haunting any of us with might-have-beens and biological destinies. We're all exactly where we're supposed to be. Not because fate decreed it, not because biology demanded it, but because we chose it. And that makes all the difference. So here's my question for you, before I go. What does choice mean to you? When have you had to choose love over biology? Or walk away from something that looked perfect but felt wrong? Drop your stories in the comments because I want to hear them. Hit that like button if the story resonated with you. If you've ever felt like someone's second choice, if you've ever had to leave something broken to find something whole. And subscribe because next time I'm going to